Hello. Welcome back to the 80s version of the Twilight Zone and the very last episode of the first season. It features two stories, A Day in Beaumont and The Last Defender of Camelot. There's a lot to go through here, especially when we're talking about the Beaumont, so strap in. Now, of course, Beaumont is a reference to Charles Beaumont, who was a writer and featured prominently in the original Twilight Zone, and stars Victor Garber, who was he had a recurring role in the TV show Orville. If you like Star Trek Next Generation, you really should check out Orville. It was a great show. The aliens come out of the spaceship carrying these pods. Now, the pods are there's a lot of references in this. It's a reference to the invasion of the body snatchers, and the spaceship exterior is not really there. That's just a plate that they put in. They only had a ramp, so it looks like that. I think that's the best way to go about it if you can't build a physical prop like that. And of course, they couldn't do decent CGI for that. But then when they exit and they start coming up the slope and they're sort of crouching to be under, the head level has to be underneath where the mask is for the actual spaceship, which looks kind of hokey like that. I don't like it. And then they start shooting at the car, and they're using Bradbury rays. I don't know where he got that idea. Of course, Bradbury rays is a reference to Ray Bradbury, who was a significant sci-fi writer and wrote episodes both for this season and for the, was it last season of the classic one in '64? Anyway, I would have just gone with lasers, but what do I know? The spaceship came down near Willoughby, which is, of course, a reference to Willoughby, the episode in the original Twilight Zone. Sheriff Haskins is a reference to Byron Haskins, who was the director of the original War of the Worlds movie. And they landed near Santa Mira Mountains, which is, Santa Mira is the town from Invaders of the Body Snatchers. There's also an Uncle Ira in here, which is, again, a reference to the invasion of the Body Snatchers. Jeff Marrows, who plays Orson, the old man, he's a sci-fi veteran, just huge list of accomplishments to his name, including Invasion of the Body Snatchers. No, wait, he wasn't in the Invasion, but he was in most of everything else. He had a very long career. This was his last role, however. The character himself, H.G. Orson, is a reference to both H.G. Wells and Orson Welles, two sci-fi authors. Haskins, the sheriff, is played by Kenneth Tooby, who was in Thing from Another World and also in Gremlins 2 as a projectionist, which I don't think you can see in the home video release because they changed that clip, so the projectionist isn't in there anymore. Pops is John Ager, another sci-fi veteran. So these are all sci-fi veterans from the 50s. They did lots and lots of the old sci-fi stuff. The extended Pinky that you can see when they're sort of shaking hand and stuff, that's all from a TV show called The Invaders. That's how you know that they're bad guys. And it's even in the very last shot when he's standing like this, and instead of just having his hand like that, he actually does this. So he keeps doing that thing. Anyway, Warren Stevens, who plays Major Whitmore, he was in Twilight Zone previously, Dead Man's Shoes, and also in Star Trek. When they get lifted up, there's this green ray that comes down onto the car, and then there's a shot of them sitting in the car, and that's just a green car. It's not anything spectacular about that. That's just a green car that they got, because that's what a car would look like under green lights. So they just got a green car. The opacity of the car isn't quite matched as it ascends into the spaceship, so you can see through sort of parts of the chassis. It's difficult to catch, but you can definitely see it. And the sort of navigation screen mentions Altair 4, which is, of course, another reference this time to Forbidden Planet, from which all the sci-fi props from the original series heralded, pretty much. They just reused cars and helmets and robots and everything else. And again, they have this blur to fade in the end. I can't say I agree with that aesthetic choice. Next, we get to The Last Defender of Camelot, which is written by George R.R. Martin, who, of course, we know from Game of Thrones, The Songs of Ice and Fire. And it stars Richard Keeley, I think, who was in Night Gallery, which is something that Serling did after the Twilight Zone was over. Maybe we should talk about that show too. And Jenny Gutter as Morgan Le Fay. And she was in Logan's run. If you haven't seen that, you really should. And she was also in, I think it's Civil War, Captain America Civil War, or the Winter Soldier. No, it's the Winter Soldier and something else. I think it's an Avenger as well. She's on the council. I think it's Avengers 2 and the Winter Soldier. So she's in the Marvel universe as well. And they don't have a practical flame for her to light her cigarette, so they do that animation thing. I don't like it. I think they could have just gone with magician flame in her hand. That's not a terribly difficult trick to pull off. It would have, taken some practice not to singe off her eyebrows, I suppose. Then we have Norman Lloyd, who played Merlin. He the actor lived to the ripe old age of 106. And his last movie, Trainwreck, wasn't released until he was over 100 years old. So props for that. When the Black and White Knight are fencing, that's some lovely effect work that they do. They have this sort of lightning effect, thunder in the background. You can see sort of sparks and stuff. And they haven't overdone it. It's easy to do, but they did that really well. However, the magic effect between Morgan and Merlin, they don't look good. I don't like this, and it's aged sort of poorly. During the fencing, however, when he's taken the head off, the suit moves at a very janky angle. And that's because it's being held up by someone. So his shoulders tilting like that. It's weird. And if you look very closely, you can see that there's a masked part. They took out the head of the actual fencer. He was probably wearing a green hood that they could then chroma out and put in the background afterwards. But you can tell if you look closely that there's a head missing there. I do like the fade for the aging of Merlin. That's tricky to do, to just remain in place like that, or to assume the same position rather. So they do that really well. It's only the elbow that drops, I think. It looks really nice. And then finally we have a matte painting of Camelot, which is nice. Now, of course, this is about Camelot and all that stuff, which is interesting because the first episode of the next season is the Once and Future King. But that's about a whole other sort of king. And I look forward to seeing you then. So we're signing off in April of '86 and we're jumping into September next week. Take care now.